The World Wrestling Entertainment to this day stands as the single most successful professional wrestling company in the entire world. But 22 years ago, there was a night that changed its entire history and future forever. The WWE can actually be traced as far back as 1952 when Roderick McMahon created the Capital Wrestling Corporation, which joined the National Wrestling Alliance the following year. Unfortunately, in November of 1954, Roderick passed away and was replaced by his son Vincent James. McMahon and his partners were successful around the North America area before creating their own company, then known as the WWF. The Worldwide Wrestling Federation, though it was shortened to just the World Wrestling Federation in 1979. As the years passed, Vince had a son, Vince Kennedy, who had his own smaller company, Titan Sports, but he was aiming for much bigger. In 1982, Vince Sr. reluctantly sold the company to his son, but he had no idea what he had planned. Around this time, the United States had several territories that respected one another, and they kept out of each other's way. But Vince Jr. wanted to take the WWF to a whole new level. He wanted it to be on television all across the country and to be seen worldwide. Naturally, this angered promoters everywhere as it broke what they had all agreed on and worked so hard to achieve. Vince Jr. admitted if his father knew what he was going to do, he would have never sold him the company in the first place. In the mid-80s, the big name stars were brought in like Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage and the Ultimate Warrior. But one guy also brought in from Canada was Bret the Hitman Hart, who was from a territory in Calgary and debuted as a tag team with his brother-in-law. For 6 years, they worked as one of the greatest tag teams in wrestling history. Around the same time, iconic Shawn Michaels was also brought in with tag team partner Marty Jannetty. This tag team lasted 7 years, but they had a bad reputation backstage. While Bret and his partner were old school, Shawn and his were very unorthodox. They were known for being party animals, and it usually got them in trouble with the other wrestlers. In the early 90s, there was the famous steroid scandal that nearly got the company destroyed, but Hulk Hogan, their biggest star, jumped ship and headed to WCW. This was huge, and bear in mind that back then, wrestling was still, as far as everyone else was concerned, 100% real. Wrestling was so carefully protected to the point if a wrestler was a good guy, which is known as a babyface, they had to travel with other babyfaces. If they were a bad guy, which is known as a heel, they would have to travel with other heels. Some wrestlers actually got punished if they were seen in public and they were a babyface but were traveling with a heel, as it made no sense and ruined the illusion. In fact, there was even an incident at a house show where some wrestlers retired, and despite feuding with them, their real life friends broke character and hugged them in front of the crowd, resulting in them being punished. Triple H was one of these and was literally forced to become everyone's punching bag for an entire year, losing almost every single match he was in. So Hulk Hogan jumping ship was a very real and dramatic event. He genuinely did have a problem with Vince, but it was still even more shocking to see it all take place. With their biggest star now gone, Bret was then pushed to the top as the next big icon and became world champion for the first time on October the 12th, 1992. Shawn Michaels disbanded from his tag team the same year but was pushed to the mid-card, winning singular titles for the time being, until finally earning his chance at the top on March the 31st, 1996, against none other than Bret Hart. Bret and Shawn had actually worked together in the past during both of their tag team eras, but also one-on-one previously without incident. But now both were big stars and their egos had inflated majorly. Both obviously thought they were the better man in the build-up to this huge match. There was no acting required. They genuinely were trying to prove who was better. However, Bret agreed that it was the right time for his opponent, and Shawn beat him as planned, but Bret wasn't particularly happy about the aftermath. It was customary to shake hands to pass the torch after dropping the belt to someone, but caught on live TV, Shawn can clearly be seen telling the referee Earl Hebner to tell Bret to get out of his fucking ring. Bret, completely in shock, stormed out of the ring and backstage. He got straight in his car and just left the building immediately in anger. He soon took a hiatus and even tried out acting during his time away before returning to the company later that year. It was during his absence that Bret actually did consider being completely done with pro wrestling altogether. But Vince managed to convince him to come back with an unprecedented at the time 20-year contract. This was unheard of, but it shows just how much loyalty there really was between the two.
They've offered me $9 million over 3 years, which is, when I got into wrestling, beyond anything I ever imagined. Vince McMahon came to me and he offered me for a lot less money, but he offered me a 20-year contract. Right now it's like I have a really tough time kind of putting my loyalty and everything in front and trying to figure out what's the right thing to do, because money's not always the most important thing.
The contract would allow Bret to continue to participate in the ring, but if he ever wanted to retire during it, he would be allowed to step down and continue to work behind the scenes as a writer and booker. Upon Bret's return, he was pushed back into the title scene, and at WrestleMania 13, just 1 year after he dropped the belt to Shawn, they were lined up for a rematch for Shawn to return the favour. However, Michaels allegedly refused to do so and faked a knee injury. This is all speculation, of course. Shawn maintains to this day that the leg injury was completely real, and he was never asked to lose to Bret, but he would have done so if he was. Shawn did a whole speech on television to explain his departure, but in reality it was supposedly a real leg injury, though he was dancing around on television just days later with no problem. Shawn even claimed at the time that the leg injury was going to retire him, but he came back just months later. On August 3rd, 1997, Bret would win his final world championship within the WWE, and November that year, in his homeland of Canada, he was scheduled to face Shawn Michaels. A night that would change wrestling forever, expose the entire business, and the sport would never be the same again. Around this time, the WWF had lost major talent to WCW, who were kicking their ass in the ratings for well over a year straight. Vince wanted to take his company further, but they were losing money and he had to cut any long-term commitments, which included Bret's 20-year contract.
He says he can't afford it anymore. Financial peril, this is his exact words. And he said, I'd be doing him a favor. I'd be doing him a favor if I go back to WCW and see if I can get my own deal. The company's in financial peril.
I don't believe that. Less than a year ago, he came to our house to ask you to stay with him. He signed 20 years with you.
During the build-up to the event, Shawn and Bret's feud worsened when Shawn went off the script and publicly accused Bret of cheating on his wife with WWF diva Sunny.
Listen here, even though lately you've had some sunny days, my friend, you still can't get the job done. The Heartbreak Kid coming off a knee injury, you coming off a knee injury, they're all handcuffed. Hitman, I'm gonna knock you down and drag you.
This was unheard of and Bret flipped. Shawn was even suspended for 2 months due to this incident, and it even led to them having a real-life fight backstage before being physically separated. They tried to work things out and remain professional, Bret claiming that he would lose to Shawn in his homeland of Montreal, Canada at the WWF pay-per-view Survivor Series if it's what Vince wanted. However, Shawn claimed that he would never do the same for him, which sent Bret into a spiral, flat out refusing to lose to Shawn at Survivor Series completely. Though he later changed his mind and said he would drop the belt to Michaels but not in Canada. Shawn later stated that he would have lost to Bret if the storyline made sense, but others refute this, claiming that Shawn genuinely would have never agreed to. Though Shawn pointed out the fact that he had lost to Bret in the past, but none was since he became a much bigger name with a much bigger ego. Bret was allegedly in talks with WCW in the past, but Vince fought to keep him. However, their money issues persisted, and Vince decided to no longer negotiate for Bret's loyalty. He wanted to focus on the new stars like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Undertaker, and D-Generation X, which would lead to what was called the Attitude Era. Bret didn't want to go to WCW, but Vince's plans for the future just didn't have him in it. Bret was also hurt because writing of his character pretty much ruined his career, making American audiences hate him, though he remained a hero in Canada.
Still giving Vince McMahon the benefit of the doubt, the history and the legacy and my past. I thought about it all night, and I called him up in the morning, and I said, talk me into staying. That's exactly what I said. Talk me into staying. I don't want to talk money. I'll stay for the deal that we have. I just want you to make some kind of a commitment to me. Finally, he laid it out to me like, what do you want to do? You make the call. I don't have any ideas. What would you do with Bret Hart? And then I realized what kind of a horrible predicament that I'm in. I came from being the #1 good guy in the whole world. And I gave that job up to become the #1 bad guy. And now you've given my bad guy job to Shawn Michaels. How can I become a good guy again? I've bashed the American people. That's where I perform 95% of the time. I'm stuck in limbo. I'm in purgatory. I can't be a great good guy and I can't be a great bad guy anymore. I'm stuck with nothing. You've actually sabotaged my career.
He also hated Vince's direction of controversy, thinking it dented the art of pro wrestling.
I can't imagine what their thinking is. I can't imagine Vince McMahon sitting around a table going, well, why don't we try this tonight? Shawn will pull his pants down and show the crack of his ass to everybody, and then he's jumping around. I wish I could be in the room and go, you guys nuts. It's become smut TV.
It's got a lot more raunchier, a lot more sexual. The show's very, very sexual, and I think in a bad way. I don't think you watch wrestling for sex. I don't think it's become something presentable to your children. Like my kids won't watch the show anymore. None of them, not even the teenagers.
Regardless, Bret reluctantly resigned from the WWF and agreed to sign with WCW. Hart was also worried that he'd be mocked after leaving, as several other wrestlers received this treatment, but Vince promised him that it wouldn't be the case. Just one day after he left, Degeneration X brought out a little person dressed as Bret to publicly humiliate him. This all caused a problem. Survivor Series was to take place on November the 9th, but Bret was due to start with WCW on December the 5th, and he was still WWF World Champion. Vince obviously approached Bret one more time to drop the belt to Shawn, but he refused.
I talked to Vince, and he goes, you have to lose to Shawn in Montreal.
I can't do that. I can't do it. I described it to Vince, I just assume blow my brains out would be about the same, what you're asking me to do. And from a character standpoint, that's what I would be doing. I would be taking Bret the Hitman Hart, would blow his brains out.
Shawn was part of a group called The Clique who often bullied the other wrestlers, and Bret just wanted to stick up for himself and others who had to constantly lose to all of them. But Bret was also upset that Shawn's promos often involved him insulting the Canadian flag and the Canadian fans. He even insulted Bret's real-life father. But Vince was trapped in a corner. A former WWF diva, Alundra Blaze, was with the company in the early to mid-90s and won the Women's Championship. Vince didn't renew her contract, so she jumped ship to WCW, still with the title belt, took it on their programming and dumped it into a trash can. Vince was terrified that Bret would do the same thing. But Bret still refused to lose to Shawn at the event, but did agree to drop it to him in the United States either before Survivor Series or on the television show straight after in Ottawa. Eventually, Shawn and Bret agreed that the match at Survivor Series would end by disqualification when Bret's family and Shawn's friends would all interfere. Bret would then drop the belt or relinquish it later on a different show, ready to start WCW in December. Bret also wanted to be able to talk to the public to explain his actions, his character, praise Vince and the company, and leave in good terms. Unfortunately, as the day neared, Vince began to reconsider his decision. Rumours of Bret leaving the WWF had leaked to the fans and several news sources. Vince was worried that if Bret remained champion after Survivor Series, it would cause problems. He was also worried that the WCW booker Eric Bischoff would go on their show the next night and announce that they had signed Bret, which Bischoff promised wouldn't happen. Vince knew he had to find a way to get the championship belt off of Bret Hart. A few days before the event, a three-way phone conversation took place between Vince himself, Shawn Michaels, and Shawn's best friend Triple H. They were all upset at Bret's refusal to drop the belt, and it was actually Triple H who piped in and suggested to screw him over, to go against the script and get Shawn the championship. On November the 8th, 1997, one day before the event, Vince met with Shawn and one of his agents, Pat Patterson. Other behind-the-scenes affiliates Gerald Briscoe and Sergeant Slaughter were also in on it. Well-respected commentator Jim Ross to this day insists that he had no idea, though many of Bret's family members believe he did. Jim Ross and fellow announcer Jerry the King Lawler were calling the match ringside, and they had no idea what was about to happen. That same day, Bret met up with Shawn and Pat Patterson to discuss the match and how it would all go down. Pat suggested that Shawn puts him in his own finishing submission move, the sharpshooter, while the referee was knocked out, and Bret agreed to this. However, conflicting reports from Shawn claim that Bret actually came up with this finish himself, which makes it even more confusing when he allegedly already had worries that he'd be screwed over that night, and spoke to fellow wrestler Vader about his concerns. The finish was supposed to come with Bret grabbing Shawn's foot, reversing the move and putting him in a sharpshooter of his own. Shawn would submit, but the unconscious referee wouldn't see it. Bret would then release the hold to try to wake him up, and then Shawn would hit him with his finishing super kick and make the pin. A second referee would run out, but Bret's family would interrupt the count, leading to a huge brawl ending in a disqualification finish. Despite his concerns, however, Bret wasn't worried because the aforementioned referee Earl Hebner was calling the match. Earl was one of the most experienced officials in the company and a good friend of Hart. He allegedly approached Earl backstage and whispered to him that he was concerned Vince was going to screw him over. Earl was shocked and said he would sooner they fire him, promising Bret on his children's lives that he would never go through with it. Shawn Michaels claimed that he informed Earl of the finish that morning, meaning he already knew of the screw job when he made this promise to Bret, but Hebner denied this and said he was only told what would happen 10 minutes before the match would begin. But due to his gut feeling, Bret was still anxious and was warned by his family and other wrestlers to not risk anything, to not lie down for too long, kick out of any pin attempt in case they do a fast count, and to not be put into any submission holds. Due to the rumours of Bret leaving the company, the event sold out and over 20,000 fans were in attendance to witness the biggest night in professional wrestling history, which just so happened to be the same day Bret began filming his own documentary, capturing some amazing behind-the-scenes footage of the incident. They actually brought out extra security for the match in case Bret attacked Shawn or Vince afterwards in retaliation, explaining it on television as a precaution for Bret and Shawn's long-time rivalry. Shawn came out degrading the Canadian flag, angering the fans majorly, but he claimed that it was Bret's idea. But some fans actually did resent Hart for leaving, shouting "You sold out" during his entrance and at some points of the match itself. The match was nearing its end and Bret did notice that Vince was now ringside. Normally he was one of the commentators, and he was never actually confirmed to have been the owner of the company either. Along with the WWF being secretive about wrestling being scripted, Vince was nothing more than an on-screen persona as far as we knew. Sergeant Slaughter was also ringside, which raised an eyebrow from Bret as well. As planned, referee Earl Hebner was knocked out, leading to Shawn putting Bret in the sharpshooter. At this point, the match director shouted instructions in Hebner's earpiece to get up, but Bret, for whatever reason, didn't seem to notice. Backstage, confusion filled the area as they all knew the planned finish and realised that Hebner was getting up far too early. Shawn also noticeably stared at Earl to make sure that he was up, revealing that he knew about the whole plan to begin with. He locked the submission in, tightening it, and refused to even give Bret the opportunity to reverse the hold. The referee quickly turned to the timekeeper and yelled for the bell to ring. Timekeeper Mark Heaton was understandably confused, but Vince elbowed him as hard as he could and yelled, "Ring the fucking bell."
Look at this! Oh, you're kidding me. Michaels, are you going to try to beat Bret Hart with a sharpshooter? Yes, he is! Are you kidding me?
Bret did manage to grab Shawn's leg to break the hold just after, but Shawn's music hit and he was announced the new world champion. At this point, referee Earl Hebner sprinted out of the ring as fast as he could. He ran backstage into a car that his brother had been running, ready to get away, and drove out of the arena at high speed. Earl locked himself in his hotel room and refused to talk to anybody for the rest of the night. Confusion filled the area, but once the initial shock lifted, Bret got to his feet and saw Vince ringside before violently spitting in his face on live television. Shawn acted like he had no idea what happened, and Vince demanded he take the belt and leave. Vince and co escaped to the back, and after the camera stopped rolling, Bret flipped. He smashed up all kinds of cameras, monitors, and ringside equipment. Some fans even threw garbage in the ring out of anger. Bret's family did rush the ring to try to console Bret as he wrote WCW in the air and expressed his love to the fans before returning to the back. Backstage, Bret questioned Shawn, who acted furious and promised he knew nothing about what had just happened, even refusing to hold the championship belt. Vince locked himself in his own office with some of his agents, while well-respected legend, The Undertaker, was furious, banging on his boss's door and demanding that he apologize to Bret. Vince had basically forced Shawn to not acknowledge that he knew anything. He wanted to take the blame, and for people to believe that he was the only one involved. Shawn promised he wouldn't take the belt out on the next night's television show, Monday Night Raw, and he also promised to not say anything negative about Bret. Two promises that he would end up breaking. Vince did eventually emerge from his office to confront Bret and explain his actions, but Bret snapped and warned him to leave or he'd have his ass kicked. The argument continued before Bret punched his boss straight in the face, leading to a small scuffle with Vince's son Shane and another agent, Gerald Briscoe. Bret told them all to leave or things would get worse, though he did ask if Vince was still going to pay him, and Vince groggily confirmed that he would. He was left with a black eye and a sprained ankle. Bret claims he lifted him up to hit him and he rolled on his ankle once he landed, but others claim that Briscoe accidentally stepped on his foot. Bret's wife at the time then angrily confronted Triple H, who also denied having any idea, but he and Shawn were mobbed by angry fans on their way back to their hotel room. Rumours went straight to the internet, which wasn't as big back then, but there was still mass confusion. Some believing it was in fact the planned finish, and many loving how it closed the show. Most other wrestlers were outraged at Bret's treatment and threatened to no-show Raw or even leave the company completely. They were convinced, however, to live out their contracts and not let the incident ruin their own futures. But the next night on Raw, Shawn had the championship belt and bragged about beating Bret with his own move in his own country, before mocking him with the aforementioned skit, while Vince, for the first time in history, broke character, had an interview with Jim Ross and said he didn't screw over Bret. He did it to himself.
There's a time-honored tradition in the wrestling business that when someone is leaving, that they show the right amount of respect to the WWF superstars in this case, who helped make you that superstar. You show the proper respect to the organization that helped you become who you are today. It's a time-honored tradition, and Bret Hart didn't want to honor that tradition. I have no sympathy for Bret whatsoever, none. I have no sympathy for someone who was supposed to be a wrestling traditionalist, not doing the right thing for the business that made him, not doing the right thing for the fans and the performers and the organization who helped make him what he is today. Bret made a very, very selfish decision. Bret's going to have to live with that for the rest of his life. Bret screwed Bret. I have no sympathy whatsoever for Bret.
Before WCW, as predicted, confirmed the events on their Monday night show the same evening, and Bret joined the company not long after. He was actually inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2006 and made amends with Vince, but refused to show up to the WrestleMania event because Shawn was there. Though eventually he did return in 2010 to finally make amends with Shawn on worldwide television to finally let this whole thing go. The Montreal Screwjob is one of the, if not the, biggest incidents in professional wrestling history. Over the years, whenever they visited Canada, or more specifically Montreal, the company, mainly Vince or Shawn, would mock the event, while Bret, who retired in 1999 from injury, was left at home to just put up with it. It was the Screwjob that kick-started the WWE's most successful era, the Attitude Era. It's what got them to finally surpass WCW with ratings, and it changed professional wrestling forever. Some even still believe that the whole thing was a setup, that Bret himself was even involved with. There's many conflicting reports over the years. As explained, Shawn claims that the whole Screwjob was Triple H's idea, while Bret came up with the finish. Bret, however, claimed that it was Pat Patterson who came up with the finish and that Gerald Briscoe had come up with the Screwjob idea. Furthermore, booker and writer Vince Russo claimed that he gave Vince the idea for the Screwjob finish, but Jim Cornette denies this, saying Russo was never even a part of any of the meetings and he was oblivious to any of it happening at all. Cornette did admit that since Bret was willing to drop the belt to anyone but Shawn, they could have used the fellow wrestler Ken Shamrock to double-cross Bret for the belt within the storyline, so he may have unintentionally given them the idea. But many believe it was all planned, saying even Bret punching Vince was fake and Vince took a fake dive. People just can't understand why or how Bret didn't see the Screwjob coming. Why would he have suspicions and then come up with or even agree to a submission finish? Even more confusing when Bret was so paranoid, he even visited Vince earlier in the day to discuss the finish again, and he wore a wire to record the entire conversation.
What would you want to do today then?
I'm open to anything.
I think what I'd like to do is get through today. I think tomorrow I should just go in and do my speech and forfeit the title. I think it allows me a chance to leave with my head up and leave in a nice way. I mean, I don't have to beat Shawn. We could have a schmoz or whatever you want.
I would think it'd be a run-in type thing. But,
yeah.
But I'm open to anything.
No, I think that's...
I'm open to anything. Like I said before, I'm determined this is going to wind up the right way.
There were so many people involved that most don't even know who else was. There's so many inconsistencies that lead people to believe that Bret and Vince worked together to form this plan for him to leave the company in a big way and to make a huge amount of money and get a load of attention in the process. After all, is it just a coincidence that the biggest night in wrestling history was the very same night Bret began filming his documentary? So what really happened in those meetings that led to that fateful day on November the 9th, 1997? Was Bret in on it? Or was it just a battle of egos clashing with a huge plan for money? Survivor Series 1997 will go down in history as one of the most impactful moments in wrestling, and we are still seeking answers.